So have you ever knocked on wood? Maybe you checked your horoscope before a big date or, worn a lucky pair of socks to an important meeting? Well, don't worry, you are absolutely not alone. Pretty much for as long as humanity has been around, we have been completely obsessed with locking down good fortune and dodging bad luck. We're constantly on the lookout for signs, omens, or some kind of astrological alignment to tell us we're on the right track. But what if we've been looking in completely the wrong direction this whole time?
For thousands of years, people have been debating where true fortune actually comes from. Do we just rely on the stars, lucky objects, and outside signs? Or is it something else entirely? Get this. Over 25 centuries ago, the Buddha introduced a totally revolutionary idea that completely shattered the conventional wisdom of the time. He taught that genuine fortune isn't just something that randomly falls out of the sky into your lap. It isn't fate. Instead, it's something you build, step by step, through your own ethics, your actions, and your inner character.
So welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be diving into a really fascinating ancient text called the Maṅgala Sutta. You can think of it as a 2,500-year-old blueprint for human flourishing. It's essentially an 11-step progressive guide to building incredible psychological resilience and lasting success. And honestly, the best part, it doesn't require any magic or lucky charms whatsoever.
Okay, let's just jump right in. Here is the step-by-step ladder we're going to climb today. First, the illusion of luck. Second, the Buddha's revolutionary answer. Third, verses 1 through 5, the foundation. Fourth, verses 6 through 9, the inner work. Fifth, verses 10 and 11, the summit. And finally, how true fortune is actually earned.
Starting right off with Section 1, the illusion of luck.
To really appreciate just how groundbreaking this text is, we have to travel back to ancient India. And what's wild is how much ancient India looked exactly like our world today when it came to obsessing over luck. Back then, society basically bought into three main sensory views of auspiciousness, or good fortune. First, you had drishta mangalik. That's the belief in lucky sights, like, say, seeing a full water pot right before a long journey. Then there was shruta mangalik, which was believing in lucky sounds, like temple bells or certain secret chants. And finally, mutta mangalik, the belief in lucky touches or smells, like the scent of fresh earth. But here is the massive danger with all of this. When we rely on these things, we're totally outsourcing our well-being to external omens. We build up this absolute dependence on rituals and celestial movements rather than stepping up and taking ethical responsibility for our own lives.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Buddha's revolutionary answer.
So, all this widespread superstition perfectly set the stage for a major historical paradigm shift. According to the ancient commentaries, it all started with a celestial being who was, honestly, just as confused about luck as the rest of us. He went seeking clarity from the Buddha and asked, "Many devas and human beings desiring their own welfare and happiness have long reflected upon what constitutes true auspiciousness. Please explain the highest blessing." I just love this divine inquiry because it is the perfect, dramatic setup for a complete redefinition of luck. The gods and humans had literally been arguing about this for ages. They couldn't agree on which omens actually worked. They were desperate for a definitive answer.
The Buddha's response hinged entirely on redefining just one single word, Maṅgala. Instead of treating it as luck or favorable omens, he completely flipped the script, transforming it to mean an inner discipline of character. True Maṅgala, he said, is cultivated through your choices and your conduct. It's this fundamental, massive shift from looking outward at the stars to looking inward at our very own actions.
Moving on to Section 3, verses 1 through 5, the foundation. Now, with that new definition established, the Buddha didn't just give some abstract philosophical lecture. He gave incredibly practical, step-by-step instructions. Let's look at the first stage of this ladder, building the external foundations of a good life. This brilliantly shows the genius of his first two verses. Check out this progression. Step 1, right company. Verse 1 says that a fortunate life begins simply by not associating with fools, people driven by greed and hatred, and instead hanging out with wise people. Step 2, right environment. Verse 2 tells us to live in a suitable place that actually supports our growth. And step 3, right goals, directing yourself toward noble aspirations. Good fortune literally starts by just curating your social circle and your physical surroundings. How practical is that?
Verses 3 through 5 keep building out this everyday foundation. The Buddha points to things like acquiring practical skills, speaking kindly, caring for your family, and engaging in honest, ethical work. He also really emphasizes generosity and living a life completely free from the heavy burden of guilt.
So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that in this framework, true spirituality isn't some mystical escape from reality. It is not separated from everyday competence, family duties, or holding down an honest job. Those things literally are the foundation of good fortune.
Next up, Section 4, verses 6 through 9, the inner work.
All right, so once your external life is in order, it is time to level up. Let's step up to the next rung of the ladder. Verse 6 shifts sharply away from our external interactions and dives into our deep internal discipline, pivoting on this incredibly important concept, appamada. That means heedfulness or diligent awareness. You see, the Buddha pointed out that mental clarity is absolutely essential for ethical living. Think about it. If your mind is clouded by intoxicants or just a general lack of attention, you can't possibly maintain that foundational good life we just talked about building. You need constant, steady mindfulness to safeguard your progress.
Let's see how this all builds up in verses 7 and 8. It's like a beautiful psychological pipeline. Step 1 is humility, respecting others and actually recognizing your own limits. Well, that naturally leads to Step 2, gratitude for what you have and for the people who have helped you. Gratitude then builds Step 3, patience, which is the ability to endure hardship without getting hostile or bitter. And finally, patience makes you receptive to learning, which throws the door wide open to Step 4, wisdom. It is just a flawless, logical progression of character development.
By the time we hit verse 9, we reach the distinctly spiritual dimension of the text. This is all about practicing deep self-discipline to realize the Four Noble Truths and ultimately, nibbana. What this tells us is that ultimate auspiciousness, the absolute highest possible blessing, isn't measured by a massive bank account or typical worldly success. It's measured by completely liberating the mind from craving and attachment altogether.
Section 5, verses 10 and 11, the summit.
Okay, this brings us right to the climax of the Maṅgala Sutta. Verses 10 and 11 represent the philosophical summit of human resilience. This is where all that foundational and inner work really pays off. Now, what's really fascinating here is visualizing the forces that are constantly tossing our untrained minds all over the place. These are known as the 8 worldly conditions: gain and loss, fame and disrepute, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. Life is just inherently unstable, right? These conditions are basically guaranteed to happen to all of us at some point. The Buddha doesn't promise that if you're a good person, you're somehow going to magically avoid loss or pain.
Instead, verse 10 teaches us that true prosperity is developing an unshakable mind, a mind that is asoka, meaning free from sorrow, viraja, free from the stains of greed and hatred, and kema, entirely secure and at peace. True fortune isn't about perfectly dodging life's terrible storms. It's about developing a well-trained mind that stays perfectly balanced and unbothered while the storm is raging all around you. Which brings us to the very final verse, verse 11. Just listen to this quote. Those who cultivate these blessings become undefeated wherever they go. I find that phrasing just incredibly powerful. Notice he says undefeated. Being undefeated doesn't mean you never fail or that you never experience a loss. It means that because of the deep character you've built, you are no longer broken by failure. You are ultimately resilient.
And finally, Section 6, true fortune is earned. So how do we actually apply this 2,500-year-old text to our lives right now today? Let's bring these ancient lessons right into the present to wrap up our explainer. What totally blows my mind is how the Buddha's ancient ladder of ascent aligns absolutely perfectly with modern science and psychology. Today, medical research proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that chronic stress, anger, and anxiety literally destroy our physical health. Conversely, we know through modern psychology that emotional regulation, practicing gratitude, and having strong social relationships build true resilience and well-being. The Buddha recognized this intimate mind-body connection millennia before modern medicine even existed. He gave us a totally practical framework for exactly how to live a healthy, successful life.
And that leaves us with this final thought. True Maṅgala, true fortune, true luck, true blessing, it just isn't something magical that happens to you. It is something you actively become through your daily choices. So I'm going to leave you with this question. When it comes to your own flourishing, are you passively relying on the stars, or are you taking charge of your own steps? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.